I gave birth on a freezing winter afternoon in the suburbs of Chicago, after 18 hours of exhausting labor so intense I could no longer feel the contractions. My body felt like it was being crushed from the inside out, and my mind clung to only one thought. My daughter was about to be born. Outside, snow blanketed everything, while inside the delivery room only a shattered yellow light flickered from the ceiling, and the sound of my own hoarse breathing filled the air. I had imagined that after all the pain, the moment my daughter let out her first cry would be the most beautiful moment of my life. I had imagined my husband, Daniel, would hold my hand, look at our child, and smile like we had dreamed about, but I was wrong. So terribly wrong. When the nurse placed the red-faced baby in my arms, I hadn't even held her tightly yet, when Daniel stepped forward and snatched a stack of papers from the nurse's hands. The nurse, an older woman with deep-set eyes and a cold face, flinched and stepped back. Daniel didn't look at me, didn't ask for my opinion, just bowed his head, picked up a pen, and began writing. "Her name will be Evelyn, after my mother," he said, his tone indifferent, as if he were giving orders to an employee, not speaking to the woman who had just given birth to his child. I struggled to sit up, my heart pounding like it was about to break free from my chest. "We agreed, remember? Her name is Lena, Daniel. Did you forget?" He turned to me, his eyes cold as steel. "You don't get to decide," Daniel said, enunciating each word. "She's my child, and my mother picked that name before you even knew you were pregnant." I was nearly paralyzed. The pain from childbirth still throbbed, but it was nothing compared to the feeling of betrayal from my own husband. I gently squeezed my daughter's tiny hand, the baby still sleeping peacefully, unaware of how cruel the world could be. The older nurse, the only other person in the room besides Daniel and me, stepped closer. She leaned in and whispered something that made it hard for me to breathe. "Do you want me to tell him the truth?" I turned to her, eyes wide. "What truth?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. But the nurse only shook her head slightly and glanced at Daniel, who was still hunched over writing, completely unaware that the atmosphere in the room had drastically changed. "Not now. But you should know. This isn't as simple as you think," she said quickly, her voice low and firm like a rock. I felt like my heart dropped into a pit. The name Evelyn on the paper, Daniel's icy expression, the nurse's knowing look, all of it stirred up a nameless dread inside me. I stammered, "I don't understand. What are you talking about?" The nurse gently squeezed my hand, as if to calm me. "Trust me. Don't let him take control of everything. You need to know the truth before it's too late." Daniel looked up, slightly frowning. "What are you two whispering about?" I pressed my lips together, trying to stay calm. "I don't agree with that name. We chose it together. I don't give you permission to change it." He let out a short laugh. "Don't give permission?" Daniel set the pen down, stepped right up to me, and looked down like I was ruining some grand ceremony of his. "Jessica, you just gave birth. You're tired, you're not thinking clearly. It's best if you don't make a fuss. I'll handle everything." I looked at him, part of me wanting to scream, to rip apart all the layers of fake calm he wore. But I didn't even know exactly what I was up against. I only knew one thing. Something was very wrong, and I couldn't let it go on. I turned to the nurse. "I need to know. Now." She nodded, her eyes serious. "All right, but you have to be prepared. Because once you know, there's no going back." I held my daughter tighter. Despite the fear, I gave a slight nod. "Tell me." Back when I was 26, I met Daniel after just landing a job as assistant to the director at a small tech company in St. Paul, Minnesota. Daniel was a software engineer, calm, smart, and with a polished look that didn't go unnoticed by others in the company. We met during a team meeting when he accidentally picked up my laptop. After a few hallway and cafeteria chats, Daniel asked me out for coffee. We dated for over a year before he proposed. I still remember the moment he knelt down in a garden of blazing red maple trees on a crisp autumn day, offering me a small but delicate ring. I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. Until I met Patricia, his mother. Patricia was over 60, dressed elegantly, always wearing classic pearl necklaces and never seen without her bold red lipstick. She didn't yell at me or say anything outright rude. Patricia hurt with suffocating politeness, as if every word was carefully chosen to make me feel small and unworthy. At our first meeting, she looked me up and down with a distant expression and asked, "You went to a state university? I thought Daniel would choose someone from the Ivy League." I gave a stiff smile, but before I could respond, she turned to Daniel, as if I didn't exist. "Well, I suppose my son's taste is a bit more modest than I expected." Daniel just laughed it off and said nothing. I thought it was just a joke. But as time went on, I realized it wasn't. When we started planning the wedding, Patricia suggested changing the main color from blue to cream because blue makes you look washed out. She complained about the venue being not upscale enough and even asked if I could lose a few pounds to look better in the dress. I tried to be patient for Daniel's sake. He always said, "My mom is strict, but she means well." I believed him. I wanted to believe that once she got to know me, things would change. But that never happened. When I got pregnant, everything escalated. Patricia seemed to think that me carrying her grandchild gave her the right to control every aspect of my life. "Jessica, you really shouldn't eat cheese like that. It'll affect the baby's intelligence." "Which hospital are you planning to deliver at?" "The one where Daniel was born is the best. I've already checked." "Don't listen to the doctors. They just say things to sound smart. When I was pregnant with Daniel, I only ate potatoes and eggs and still gave birth to a perfect baby." I tried to explain that I had my own doctor and a clear healthcare plan, but each time Daniel would sigh and brush it off. "Don't stress. She just cares about you and the baby." But I knew. She didn't care about me. She just wanted to control everything, even the baby who hadn't been born yet. I remember once she took me shopping for baby clothes but then picked out everything herself, all pink, all printed with the name Evelyn, her name. When I gently reminded her that we hadn't decided on a name yet, she just smiled. "No need to discuss it. That name is a legacy. I already talked to Daniel." I was stunned. Daniel had never mentioned that. When I asked him about it that night, he just said, "Yeah, she brought it up, but I figured, come on, it makes her happy. What's the harm?" That's when I started to feel afraid, not of Patricia, but of Daniel. Afraid of his silence, his constant willingness to give in, making me feel like a stranger in my own life. I used to believe that being a daughter-in-law meant learning how to compromise, but I didn't think it meant giving up my own voice or sacrificing my daughter's identity just to please my mother-in-law. Now, sitting on the hospital bed with my baby in my arms, I recalled it all like a slow-motion film. All the times I stayed quiet, all the times I gave in. It all led to the moment Daniel signed Evelyn on the birth certificate without even asking me. And now, when the nurse whispered, "Do you want me to tell him the truth?" I knew this wasn't just about naming a child. This was a truth I wasn't ready to face, but one I could no longer avoid. I looked at her. Her eyes seemed to see through something, and I gave a small nod. I got pregnant one chilly March morning in Minnesota when the wind slipped through the windows like a reminder that life was about to turn a new page. 2 red lines appeared on the test and my heart raced. I was both overjoyed and terrified. Happy because this was our first child. Terrified because I knew his mother wouldn't leave us in peace. Just 3 days after we shared the news, Patricia called at 7 in the morning while I was still in bed, aching after a sleepless night. She didn't ask how I felt, didn't congratulate me. Instead, her voice was clear and commanding. "Jessica, I've sent you a list of foods to avoid, a reliable nutritionist, and the best hospital in the area. Don't follow nonsense from the internet. I know what's best for the baby." Before I could respond, she hung up. I told Daniel, hoping he'd understand how I felt, being pregnant for the first time, needing support more than control, but he just shrugged. "That's just how my mom is, you know that. She's only trying to help." I didn't know how to respond. help? How is it help when I wasn't allowed to decide anything for myself? From then on, Patricia sent weekly emails, sometimes 10 pages long, filled with detailed notes about diet, ultrasound schedules, even playlists of classical music, to develop the baby's brain. She even bought a music player and sent it to our house, insisting I play it for 2 hours a day. I chose an OBGYN at a private clinic I trusted, someone who had cared for me even before I got married. But when Patricia found out, she was furious. She wanted me to go to St. Briar Hospital, where she volunteered and where Daniel was born. I've already made an appointment for you, next Friday. Don't embarrass me. When I pushed back and said I wanted to stick with my doctor because I felt safe, Daniel looked at me like I was causing trouble. You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's just a hospital. I started to feel lost in my own life. Every morning, I woke up to a long list of shoulds and should-nots dictated by Patricia. Meals had to be precise in portion and timing. Every evening, I had to send her my meal plan. One time, I had pancakes with syrup, and she called in the middle of the night to scold me. Jessica, sugar will slow the baby's brain development. Do you want it to fall behind its peers? Daniel sat beside me, and instead of standing up for me, he blamed me. You're stressing my mom out. Don't make her worry so much. I broke down in tears. Not over pancakes, but from the helplessness that was slowly eating away at my heart. By the second trimester, I had severe morning sickness. I felt exhausted, my taste changed, and I couldn't stand the smell of the food Patricia sent. I tried to eat more gently, adjusting to what my body could handle. That's when Patricia accused me of ruining the baby's future. She started coming over every weekend, bringing baskets of food, a blood pressure monitor, and charts tracking fetal development. Once, I woke up to find her rummaging through our kitchen, throwing out anything that didn't meet her standards. Daniel stood there with a coffee mug, saying nothing. I nearly shouted, "This is my home. How can you let your mom do this?" He just sighed and set his mug down. I'm tired of all this drama, Jessica. Do you want everything to be a mess? Drama? When I was carrying a tiny life inside me, living by someone else's rules, without even basic support from the man I married, I started journaling just to hold on to a piece of myself, because I was scared that someday I wouldn't recognize who I was anymore. The breaking point came when Patricia brought over a leather-bound notebook with a list of names she had already picked out, all starting with E, with Evelyn written in bold at the top. This is a family tradition. I've already decided. Daniel agrees, right, son? I looked at Daniel, hoping he'd shake his head, but he stayed silent, then gave a small nod. I don't know how I held myself back from screaming right then. I just got up, held my belly, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door. For the first time, I realized that the child growing inside me wasn't just mine. It was being treated like a piece of legacy. Patricia wanted to mold in her own image, and Daniel was no longer my partner. I just didn't know yet. Things were only beginning to fall apart. I was admitted to the hospital on a gloomy morning in early October, when golden leaves had begun to fall across the porch and the wind carried a chill that signaled winter was near. Labor started at 3 a.m, gentle at first, like a soft squeeze, then quickly turned into violent contractions that left me unable to stand. Daniel drove me to the hospital, but didn't say a word the entire ride. He was on the phone the whole time. Of course, with his mother, I remember his voice clearly, steady and unhurried. Mom, we're on our way. No, I've got the hospital bag. Yes, your name is already on the list, just like you said. His mother's name? At that moment, I was in too much pain to think straight. But deep down, a gnawing sense of unease began to rise. While I lay on the hospital bed, my back drenched in sweat, Daniel sat in a chair, eyes glued to his phone screen. He scrolled through the news, texted, and occasionally chuckled at someone on the other end. He didn't hold my hand once, didn't ask if I was okay. Even the nurse frowned and gave him sideways glances. I screamed through a contraction, my whole body trembling from the pain, and all he said was, "Don't be so loud. You're making everyone tense." When the baby let out her first cry, I thought I would burst into tears from emotion, but instead I felt a cold emptiness. I hadn't even held her for a full minute before Daniel stepped up, brushed my hand aside, and snatched the birth certificate papers from the nurse as if he were the only one with any right. "She'll be named after my mother." "Evelyn Jane," Daniel said, without even looking at me. I was confused. We agreed on another name. Lena Grace. We both agreed, don't you remember? He looked at me like I was a stranger. "I didn't forget. I changed my mind, and you don't have the right to object." I was stunned. After 18 hours of labor, my body drained, my mind a mess, and now the man I'd shared my life with was trying to erase my voice completely. The nurse standing nearby, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes, suddenly leaned in and whispered, soft as wind brushing my ear, "Do you want me to tell him the truth?" I turned to her, trying to steady myself. "What truth?" I whispered, my breath short and uneven. She looked at Daniel, then back at me, her eyes filled with determination. "Not yet. But you need to know. And you need to know now." I nodded. I didn't know what I was facing, but I could feel it was something big. I looked at Daniel. "You don't have the right to change her name without me." He chuckled. "I already did. And if you don't want to make this harder, it's best to stay quiet." I gripped the blanket tightly, trying to stay calm, but the nurse didn't stay silent. She stepped forward and firmly pulled the papers from Daniel's hands. "You don't get to treat her like this," she said, her voice cold as steel. "And if you think I don't know what you did with the insurance paperwork, you're mistaken." Daniel froze. "What are you talking about?" I looked up at the nurse. "Insurance paperwork? What's going on?" She sighed. "I checked when you were admitted. You're not listed on the parental insurance file. Only one parent is listed as legal guardian, and that's Daniel. You're not legally recognized as the mother." I went numb. My blood felt like it stopped flowing. "That can't be. I'm her biological mother." Daniel turned away, fists clenched. "You don't understand." "Then explain," I said, my voice trembling. "What did you do?" Daniel took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "I just arranged things to be safe. I needed to make sure that if anything happened, custody would go to someone responsible." "You're saying I'm not responsible enough for my own child. You wouldn't even listen to my mother." That's when it hit me. Everything. From the name Evelyn, to the diet, the hospital, and now the legal documents, were all pieces of a plan that Daniel and his mother had carefully laid out. A plan to push me out of my own child's life. The nurse stood tall, arms crossed. "She has the right to know. And I'll make sure the records are corrected. Today." Daniel stepped back, his expression shifting from anger to worry. I held my baby tighter, tears streaming down, not from pain, but from betrayal. I didn't know exactly what awaited me beyond that hospital door. But I knew one thing. I would not stay silent another second. I never imagined I'd be sitting in a hospital room, holding my newborn daughter, questioning whether the man I'd shared 3 years of marriage with was plotting to take away my right to be a mother. The nurse, Carol, still stood there, her expression firm like someone who had witnessed too many broken families through the lens of her scrubs. She placed a hand on my shoulder, light but steady. "We need to review all your records, Jessica, and I'll personally speak with the administration." Daniel stood frozen, his shoulders trembling slightly, eyes darting between me and Carol. He no longer looked composed, no longer in control. I saw the fear in his eyes, and it sent a chill through me. "What did you do?" I asked again, this time with a voice no longer shaking but steady and firm. "Why isn't my name on the paperwork? Why did you list yourself as the sole legal parent?" Daniel turned away, avoiding my gaze. "You don't understand, Jessica. I did what I had to do to protect the baby." I laughed, an empty, hollow laugh. Protect her? By erasing her mother from the records? You think that's the right thing to do? Daniel clenched his fists. My mom said, if you ever left, if you changed your mind, then I wouldn't have any rights to her. She was just being cautious. I could barely believe what I was hearing. So your mother told you to deceive me? So you'd have full custody if I ever walked away? He didn't answer, but the way he looked down said everything. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, gripping the blanket around me. I knew Patricia didn't like me. I knew she always wanted control, but I never imagined she'd orchestrate a legal plan to push me out of my own family. And Daniel, the man I loved, the man I trusted, went along with it. Carol, I turned to the nurse. I want to speak to someone from administration immediately. I want copies of all insurance registration, custody documents, and every form Daniel signed on my behalf. We'll do it right away. She nodded, then turned to Daniel, her voice steely. And I suggest you don't try anything reckless, because everything is being documented from this moment on. I reached for my phone, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed it from the table beside me. Jessica, you're overreacting. You're not thinking clearly. You just gave birth. You need to rest. I looked at him, calmer than I'd ever been. Give me back my phone, Daniel. No, he said, his voice hoarse. We need to talk in private. Without outsiders. There's nothing left to say in private, I replied, turning to Carol. I need to call my sister. She's the only family I have nearby. She nodded. I'll borrow the duty nurse's phone. She walked out, leaving Daniel and me in a silence so heavy it was suffocating. Daniel tried to move closer, but I pulled back. You planned this with your mother. You meant to deceive me, Daniel. How do you expect me to ever trust you again? I didn't want to lose the baby, he nearly shouted, then quickly reined himself in, realizing he'd just given everything away. I looked up at him, feeling both heartbroken and clear-eyed. You weren't afraid of losing your child. You were afraid of losing control. And you were more afraid of losing your mother than losing your wife. Right then, the door swung open. Carol walked in with a younger woman wearing a badge that read Admin Supervisor, Nicole. In their hands was a thick stack of documents. Nicole placed them on the table, opened the folder, and flipped through the pages. Per Miss Jessica's request, here is the complete documentation related to insurance and parental registration. She stopped at one page and pointed to a bolded line. Legal guardian, Daniel Weston. I could barely breathe. Nicole looked at me with sympathetic eyes. Since this is a special circumstance and you're physically present, you have every legal right to amend the records. But I'll need identity verification and your written consent. I'll do it right now, I said without a second of hesitation. And I want every change documented and signed by a witness. Daniel stepped back, his face pale. Jessica, please. This isn't what my mom meant to do to hurt you. She was just thinking about the future. It wasn't her. It was you. You're the one who signed. You're the one who erased me from being a mother. I stood up, legs still shaky from giving birth, but my voice steady as stone. I won't let this happen again. Not to me, not to my daughter. And when Carol returned with the phone, I didn't hesitate to dial. My sister, Chloe. Danielle was less than 20 minutes away from the hospital. I held the phone to my ear, my voice strangely calm. Chloe, I need you. Come to the hospital right now. It's urgent. Less than 20 minutes after the call, Chloe, my sister, burst into the hospital room, her face full of worry. As soon as she saw me, she rushed forward, wrapping her arms around my shoulders, like she was afraid I might collapse at any moment. What's going on? You sounded terrified, Chloe asked, her eyes quickly scanning from Daniel to Carol, who was standing near the bed with a guarded expression. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I handed Chloe the file Nicole had just given me, a copy of all the insurance and guardianship documents. She flipped through a few pages, her initial confusion quickly turning into fury. He removed you from the documents? You just gave birth and he dared to do this? Daniel stood near the door, arms crossed, his voice low but tense. I don't need outsiders interfering in my family's business. Chloe turned on him. Your family? This baby is my niece, and the person you're trying to push out of her life is my sister. Don't kid yourself. I looked at Daniel. I wanted to believe this was just a legal mistake, a careless arrangement. But the strange calm in his demeanor, the silence every time I asked questions, it all pointed to something much darker. Chloe stepped toward the table where Daniel had placed my phone after snatching it earlier. Next to it, his own phone was lit up, an incoming message. Whether out of instinct or suspicion, Chloe picked it up. He didn't lock it, she muttered, then glanced at me. Do you want to see who he was texting while you were giving birth? I hesitated. Chloe. But she had already opened the messages. Within seconds, her face froze. Her eyes widened, her fingers tightened around the phone. You have to see this. I took the phone, my hands trembling so much I nearly dropped it. On the screen was a conversation between Daniel and someone named Madeline. No last name, but the profile picture showed a blonde woman with a polished smile. She looked vaguely familiar. I scrolled down. The most recent message read, "Just waiting for you. She'll have nothing once the baby is born. You and your mom took care of everything." My mind went blank, my vision blurred, but I could still read every word below it. I can't believe you're finally free of her. Soon, we'll be a real family. Chloe's voice was cold and sharp. You remember Madeline, right? Karen's daughter. Your mother-in-law's best friend? The one Patricia always said was beautiful, well-mannered, and more worthy of Daniel than anyone else? I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The pieces started falling into place. Perfectly, terrifyingly. Patricia had never liked me. She'd always tried to push me out of Daniel's life, but I never imagined she'd go so far as to find a replacement. And Daniel, the man I trusted most, willingly played the leading role in this cruel scheme. You were seeing her? I asked, my voice almost unrecognizable. Daniel didn't answer, but he didn't need to. His silence said more than any excuse ever could. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself, trying to shield against the harsh truth closing in on me. You were going to take everything from me? I whispered. My child, my right to be her mother, the life I built. Daniel leaned toward me, his voice tense. Jessica, you don't understand. You've always been too emotional, too sensitive. You were never the kind of woman my mother hoped for. Worthy? I laughed bitterly. So your solution was to betray me? And secretly prepare to leave me with nothing? Daniel clenched his fists, staring at the floor. My mom said, if you ever walked away from the family, you'd drag me down with you. She said Madeline would help me go further. She believes Madeline is a better investment. Chloe slammed the phone onto the table, her voice shaking with rage. So, family is just an investment to you? And Jessica, the woman who stood by you when you had nothing, is just a liability? I looked down at my daughter, still peacefully sleeping in my arms. My mind swirled with pain, anger, betrayal. But beneath it all was a flicker of something stronger. Resolve. I turned to Chloe. Do you still have contact with Ethan, our cousin, the lawyer? Chloe nodded. Of course. I'll call him right now. And Jess? You're not alone in this. I held my daughter tightly, then looked Daniel straight in the eye. You just lost everything, Daniel. And this time, I'm the one rewriting the rules. I was still holding my daughter in my arms as Chloe dialed Ethan, our cousin, now a family law attorney in Minneapolis. Each ring echoed like a pounding heartbeat in my chest. I couldn't believe I had once seen Daniel as my rock. The man standing in front of me now wasn't a husband. He was a stranger who had quietly laid out an entire chessboard to cut me out of my own family. As soon as Ethan answered, Chloe didn't waste a second. Ethan, it's Chloe. Jessica just gave birth, but her husband is trying to take full custody of the baby. We have documents and witnesses at the hospital. We need to act now. Ethan asked only one question. How long is she staying in the hospital? At least 2 more days, Chloe replied. Keep every document. Don't sign anything else. I'll be there in under an hour. I nodded at Chloe, but my eyes stayed locked on Daniel. He was leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, trying to look calm, but his right foot twitched, a telltale habit when he was nervous. He knew things were out of his control. I looked back at the table. The birth certificate still lay there, stamped with Evelyn Jane Weston. The name Patricia had chosen herself, carried out by Daniel like an obedient child awaiting his mother's command. I didn't need to think twice. Cradling my daughter with one arm, I reached out with the other, grabbed the paper, and coldly tore it in half, then again into quarters. Daniel flinched. Jessica? What are you doing? Taking back my right to be a mother, I said, not blinking. You won't control me, and you definitely won't control her. The sound of tearing paper cut through the heavy air like a blade, severing the last thread of what I had once naively called family. The doors swung open, and, like a scene from a script I'd seen too many times, Patricia walked in, her heels clicking sharply on the polished tile floor. She wore a cream fur coat, flawless red lipstick, and swept the room with her eyes like she was the one who'd just given birth. My body tensed instinctively. Chloe stepped closer to shield the bed, but I raised a hand to stop her. Patricia approached the foot of the bed, her gaze landing on the shredded birth certificate on the floor. She gave a half smile. I take it you've figured everything out. You knew I gave birth today, but didn't bother to ask me a single question, I said, my voice low. You only cared whether your name was printed on the birth certificate. Patricia crossed her arms. Yes, because it's what's best for the child, a name with value, history, and protection. She glanced at Daniel. As I said, you needed to stick to the plan. Daniel swallowed hard, his lips tight. The confidence he once had was gone. There were no more excuses left. I sat up straighter, holding my baby closer. So, what's your plan, Patricia? Take custody, bring her to live with you and Madeline? And me, her biological mother? Just erased from her life like I never existed? She didn't deny it. She didn't even look away. You're not the kind of woman fit to raise a child in the Weston family. Too emotional, too indecisive, lacking direction. Madeline and her mother will provide a more stable environment. I could hardly believe I was hearing those words from a woman who was educated, once a respected high school principal. And that gives you the right to override my right to be a mother? I said through clenched teeth. Patricia smirked. You only thought you had rights. Chloe stepped forward, her eyes burning. If you think you can use your influence to take custody of my niece, then you'd better prepare for a very long legal battle, and you'll lose. I looked directly at Daniel without a trace of pity. You can keep following your mother, or you can step out of her shadow and do the right thing, but remember this. I have evidence, witnesses, and a lawyer, and I'm ready to take this to court. Daniel stepped back half a pace. His eyes flicked to Patricia, as if searching for an answer, but she said nothing. The certainty in her gaze had turned into a glossy shell, starting to crack. I bent down and kissed my daughter's forehead. You'll grow up in a world where your mother never bows to injustice, no matter who stands in the way. Daniel stood frozen, fists clenched at his sides, eyes clouded like someone waking up from a long, bitter dream. I stared at him without blinking, waiting for a reaction. Anger, defiance, resistance like before? But this time, nothing came. Just silence, stretching on like a held breath. Then he exhaled, like all the air had been drained from his chest. His shoulders dropped, the hardness fading from his face. I can't do this, Daniel said, his voice low like a confession. Patricia immediately turned to him, her sharp eyes flashing with shock and fury. What did you say? She took a step toward him, her tone sharp. Do you have any idea how long we've prepared for this? How many years I endured to get you here, and now you say you can't? Daniel still didn't look at her. His eyes were on me and the baby. For the first time since she was born, his gaze didn't feel distant. Something had changed. Maybe it was too late, but it was real. "You're not the one who lives with her," Daniel said, his voice steady but weary. "I do, and I don't want to live like this anymore." "I gave up my youth for you," Patricia nearly screamed. "And now you think you can stand here and throw it all away over some foolish emotion?" Chloe raised an eyebrow. "That foolish emotion you're talking about is my sister's right to be a mother." Patricia glared at her, then turned back to Daniel, as if willing him to return to her carefully crafted path. But this time, he didn't move. He bowed his head, exhaled, and said softly, "I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't keep doing what my conscience won't allow." That was the moment I knew the game was over. Not because Daniel had suddenly become brave, but because he finally let go of the strings his mother had pulled for so long. His silence today wasn't avoidance. It was refusal. Patricia stood there for a few more seconds, her expression flickering between wounded pride and anger. Then she spun on her heel and stormed out of the room without another word. The sound of her heels on the tile floor echoed like the collapse of a crumbling empire. Daniel didn't follow her. The air in the room felt lighter, though still tense like a drawn string. Carol stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We need to fix the paperwork today, before there's any further interference from Daniel's family." Nicole, the admin supervisor, returned with a fresh set of documents. "I've prepared a new guardianship registration. Once you sign here, Ms. Jessica, we'll update the legal records, naming you as the sole legal guardian unless a court decides otherwise." I didn't hesitate. I took the pen. My hand trembled slightly, but my heart didn't. I signed each letter carefully, as if laying the foundation of my life all over again. This time, I wasn't being led by anyone. When I set the pen down, Nicole nodded. "The records will be updated today, and all previous changes, including your husband's unilateral filing, will be voided." Chloe turned to me, gripping my hand. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." Daniel remained still, as if trying to come to terms with the consequences of his own actions. He opened his mouth but said nothing. Maybe he wanted to apologize, maybe he was just looking for a quiet way to back out. I didn't care. I lifted my daughter higher, gazing into her tiny, barely opened eyes. "No one will ever make decisions for you again," I whispered. "From now on, you'll live the life you deserve. Free, loved, and respected." The door closed softly behind us, but I knew that from this day forward, every old door had slammed shut. Ethan arrived about an hour later and immediately began working with the hospital's legal department to file a comprehensive signed and witnessed report. We had everything: proof of Daniel's falsification, messages with Madeline, Carol's testimony, a copy of the altered birth certificate, and now the new legally binding documents. There was nothing left to lose, and nothing left to fear. That day, I didn't just give birth to my daughter. I gave birth to a new version of myself. A mother who knows her worth, and a woman who will never let anyone take that away again. I left the hospital on a gray Tuesday afternoon, the Minnesota sky thick with clouds, a soft breeze rustling the bare tree branches like the whole world was shedding its old skin. I carried my daughter, little Lena, wrapped snugly in a beige fleece blanket, her tiny face nestled against my chest, her breathing steady like a gentle lullaby. Daniel didn't come with us. He didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note or send a message. When I looked back one last time, the hospital room was empty, like everything that had happened in it was just a long, heavy dream. But my daughter was the living proof that I had made it through, and wasn't looking back. Chloe drove us home in her SUV. She had the car seat ready, the heat turned on, and a bag packed for both of us, like the big sister I knew I could count on. As the car pulled away from the hospital gates, I closed my eyes for a moment, letting go of the last traces of the prison I had once called my husband's family. 3 days later, Patricia called. First, there were missed calls, then texts. The first few were gentle. "The baby needs her paternal family." Then came the veiled threats. You should remember who raised Daniel to be successful. And finally, outright blame. You're destroying a child's future out of selfishness. I didn't answer any of them. I changed my number, blocked emails and social media. I left no cracks for Patricia to slip into the new world I was building for Lena. A world without manipulation, control, or deceit. As for Daniel, after the case fell into Ethan's hands, he went silent. I heard that a few weeks after I left the hospital, he tried to salvage things with Madeline, the secret lover during my pregnancy. But she quickly walked away when she realized Daniel no longer had status or influence. His job at the software firm was suspended after internal reports about the insurance fraud surfaced. Within a month, Daniel had lost almost everything: his job, his affair, and even his mother's support once she saw it all fall apart. I was different. I didn't lose anything. I reclaimed what was mine. I filed for divorce just 1 week after returning home. Ethan handled all the paperwork personally. Daniel didn't contest it, didn't show up at the first mediation. He probably knew that everything he did in that hospital had been documented, witnessed, and recorded. The more silent he stayed, the more he avoided an even bigger lawsuit. Life after that wasn't easy. I had many sleepless nights with Lena crying, mornings when my eyes were swollen from exhaustion. But in every tiny hug, every soft breath as she napped on my chest, I felt a peace I had never known before. I returned to part-time work from home, taking small freelance projects in financial analysis, my field of study. Chloe helped care for Lena on weekends, and Ethan provided legal support whenever I needed it. I wasn't alone. And most importantly, I was no longer under anyone's control. I wasn't looking for revenge. I didn't need Daniel or Patricia to pay for what they'd done. The truth was, they brought that ending upon themselves, with poor choices, by valuing power and pride over love. I didn't win with cruelty. I won by protecting my daughter from a future controlled by people who didn't deserve her. And above all, I reclaimed freedom, for her and for myself. One early spring morning, I took Lena to the park near our home. Soft sunlight fell across her fine hair, and her eyes opened wide, seeing the world for the first time with a pure, untainted gaze. I sat down on a wooden bench, held her close to my chest, and whispered, "This is where we begin again, Lena. Just us. And I promise, no one will ever take you from me again." She didn't respond, of course, but I saw her smile as if she understood everything, and I smiled too, light as the breeze. Not because I'd forgotten what had happened, but because I had moved beyond it. Through my own story, I realized not everyone who carries the title family stands for protection and love. Some use it as a weapon to control, to violate freedom and dignity. But when you dare to stand up, to defend your voice and your right to be a mother, you don't just save yourself, you give your child a future free from manipulation. Sometimes, freedom begins with the courage to say, enough. What do you think about Jessica's story and the choice she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional stories and powerful life lessons about family,